While the space race of the 1960s is often remembered for milestones like the first human spaceflight or lunar landings, the Soviet Union achieved other pioneering successes through their ambitious Venera program of Venus missions. From 1961 to 1983, Soviet scientists launched 13 probes to Venus as part of the Venera series, far exceeding any other nation's efforts. Remarkably, 8 of these spacecraft successfully landed on the inhospitable surface, collecting data from Venus's hellish conditions. By sending dozens of probes to orbit and land on another planet, Venera helped establish the USSR as leaders in exploring the cosmos beyond Earth. They obtained the first ever images from the surface of another world and made formative discoveries about Venus's carbon dioxide atmosphere and scorching temperatures. While Americans were primarily focused on satellites and lunar objectives, the Soviet Union turned their attention to exploring Venus and became pioneers in the direct study of unfamiliar alien environments. Through their systematic Venera missions, they made significant breakthroughs in understanding our neighboring planet, providing insights that remain relevant even today. Through overcoming adversity to achieve regular detailed missions, the Soviet Union demonstrated commitment and ingenuity in the maiden era of interplanetary travel. Though often overlooked, their groundbreaking Venera program was pivotal to opening humanity's eyes to the secrets of worlds beyond our own, and here's how they did it. The quest to understand Venus began in the midst of the Cold War. In the late 1950s, both the United States and the Soviet Union were racing to reach the stars. This was a race to the sky, a game of conquest, and the Soviets took the lead with their Venera program. The Soviet Union's extensive and sophisticated missions to Venus positioned them as leaders in space exploration during that time. But this feat was not achieved without its challenges and failures. In 1961, Venera 1 became the first spacecraft to venture toward Venus, otherwise known as Hell Planet. Although it lost communication, it marked the dawn of the Soviet space age and was highly sophisticated and ambitious. The United States joined the quest with its Mariner program. Despite the challenges, the USSR's early advantage in heavy lifting capacity allowed them to maximize their resources and launch spacecraft to new heights, highlighting their commitment to exploring new planets beyond Earth. The USSR's declassified documents and photos from Venera suggest that they had a higher purpose in their exploration of Venus, possibly indicating a greater understanding of the planet's potential than we had until recently. The Venera missions provided valuable insights about Venus' atmosphere, as before these missions, we had little to no knowledge about the planet's atmospheric conditions. After the unsuccessful mission of Venera 1, Venera 2 was launched from Tyazeli Sputnik towards the planet Venus and carried a TV system and scientific instruments. On February 27, 1966, the spacecraft passed Venus at a distance of 24,000 kilometers and entered a heliocentric orbit. The Venera 2 spacecraft was equipped with cameras, as well as a magnetometer, solar and cosmic X-ray detectors, piezoelectric detectors, ion traps, a Geiger counter, and receivers to measure cosmic radio emissions. During the flyby, all of Venera 2's instruments were activated, requiring that radio contact with the spacecraft be suspended. The probe was to have stored data using onboard recorders and then transmitted it to Earth once contact was restored. Following the flyby, the spacecraft failed to re-establish communications with the ground. It was declared lost on March 4, 1966. An investigation into the failure determined that the spacecraft had overheated due to a radiator malfunction. Venera 3, in 1966, became the first human-made object to impact another planet, although its communication was lost during the descent. Sadly, it couldn't fulfill its mission to transmit data from Venus's surface after the radio communication was lost during the flight. Venera 4 launched a year later after Venera 3 and successfully sent back data from Venus's atmosphere, revealing its extreme conditions. However, it also failed to transmit data from the surface due to the harsh conditions. Then came Venera 5 and 6, both in 1969. These intrepid probes braved Venus's crushing atmosphere, providing invaluable insights into its composition. Venera 6 even measured the planet's intense surface temperature. Though the missions faced challenges, Venera 5's communication was lost, and Venera 6 succumbed to the harsh Venusian environment after just 51 minutes. They both paved the way for future Venus exploration. These early Soviet efforts remain a testament to humanity's relentless curiosity about the cosmos and our ability to push the boundaries of space exploration. The Venera program soon tasted success. Venera 7, in 1970, made history by becoming the first spacecraft to land and transmit data from Venus's surface back to Earth. It revealed blistering temperatures and crushing pressures. Venera 7's triumphant entry into the Venusian atmosphere marked a significant milestone in space exploration. It endured the intense heat and pressure, eventually settling on the Venusian surface. While its communications were intermittent due to the rough landing, Venera 7 did manage to transmit invaluable data about Venus's atmosphere. Following this success, the Venera program continued its mission to unveil the secrets of Earth's enigmatic sister planet. Venera 9 and Venera 10, in 1975, delivered the first images from the Venusian surface, giving us a glimpse of this inhospitable world. This success aroused a glimmer of hope for the Russian scientists, and they made further attempts to send more probes to Venus. This led to the launch of Venera 13 and 14. In 1978, Venera 13 and Venera 14 surpassed their predecessors by withstanding the Venusian environment for over 2 hours. They returned detailed color images and conducted experiments on Venus's soil composition, solidifying our understanding of our neighbor. These missions, while facing tremendous challenges, provided an invaluable treasure trove of data that significantly advanced our knowledge of Venus. They stand as remarkable achievements in the history of space exploration, marking our relentless pursuit of understanding the cosmos. But perhaps the most iconic mission was Magellan, which arrived in 1990. Magellan used radar to peer through Venus's thick clouds and unveiled its volcanoes, mountains, and vast plains. In 2005, the European Space Agency launched Venus Express. This orbiter was a game-changer. It studied Venus's atmosphere, winds, and the enigmatic superrotation Venus Express, and even discovered the possibility of lightning in Venus's clouds, adding another layer to its mysterious atmosphere. As we step into the present, NASA's Parker Solar Probe, while primarily focused on the Sun, swings by Venus for gravity assists. It's a unique opportunity to gather data on both our Sun and Venus. Venus, with its searing heat, superrotating winds, and thick clouds, remains a celestial enigma. Yet, each mission has brought us closer to unraveling its secrets. You've got to wonder what really drove the Soviets to focus so much on exploring Venus back in the early days of spaceflight. On the surface, it seems like they just wanted to increase their scientific knowledge of our nearest planetary neighbor. But there may have been a few other reasons behind the scenes as well. Some historians think using Venus as a military outpost may have appealed to them. Located much closer than Mars, Venus could have given them an edge for snooping on the Americans or projecting power. There's also the idea they hoped Venus could eventually be colonized by the USSR to lay claim to more territory and resources. Another theory is that by concentrating on Venus while the US stumbled with their early probes, the Soviets saw an opportunity to get a leg up in the all-important space race. Every discovery they made was a chance to show their technological superiority. And let's be real, money talked big time in those days, just as it does today. With tighter budgets than NASA, hitting the closer target of Venus meant the probes had greater odds of success before funds dried up. The shorter trip from Earth surely helped their bottom line too. So when you combine scientific curiosity with political showmanship and fiscal practicalities, it starts to make sense why the resourceful Soviets seemed so hell-bent on unraveling Venus's mysteries. Their motivation was likely a mix of all these factors, but exploring our sister planet sure paid off in the long run. The Soviet Union made a remarkable series of discoveries about the planet Venus thanks to their groundbreaking Venera space missions between 1961 and 1983. While the conditions on Venus had long been assumed to be intensely hot, no one truly knew the full extent of the hellish environment until the Venera probes withstood it firsthand. Through launching over a dozen probes into Venus's dense atmosphere, several of which even survived to land on the surface, the Soviet scientists were able to really peel back the curtains on what was happening there. And boy, were they surprised by some of the findings. First off, the temperatures were off the charts, over 450 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. No wonder earlier missions simply vaporized upon arrival. But it got even wilder. The atmospheric pressure down there was a whopping 90 times what we feel at sea level. And as if that crushing weight wasn't enough, the atmosphere was almost entirely made up of carbon dioxide, the powerful greenhouse gas. No wonder the temperatures were through the roof with all that heat getting trapped. To top it all off, Venus lacked any kind of magnetic shielding like we have here on Earth. So with no protection from the solar winds and all that greenhouse warming, the surface gets blasted with brutal radiation on the regular. It's amazing any of the Venera probes lasted as long as they did under those conditions. After bravely withstanding the hellish climate up close, the Soviet space program had answered some of science's biggest questions about Venus. In the process, they helped reveal our mysterious neighbor was one really inhospitable place, unlike any planet humanity had encountered before. Not a place we want to visit anytime soon, that's for sure. For decades, the Soviets kept a pretty tight lid on just what their Venera probes were discovering on the hellish surface of Venus. All we heard was how inhospitable it was, and no way anything could survive down there, right? Well, it wasn't until years later that some declassified photos from the 1980 Venera 13 mission started raising some eyebrows in the science community. When one researcher took a real close look at the images, he noticed something that gave him chills. Among the gloomy overcast landscape captured by Venera 13, three mysterious objects appeared in the panoramic scenes. First was some kind of plate or disc that seemed to change shape between shots. Then a strange black blob that vanished without a trace. But the weirdest of all was like nothing you've ever seen, a creepy scorpion-like creature just crawling around. Of course, finding alien animals was the last thing anyone expected on hellish Venus. But the way these objects moved and faded so eerily, it really seemed like they could be some kind of organisms adapting to the extreme heat. Who knows, maybe the Soviets found proof back then that life can find a way, even in the most unearthly of places. Their secrets from that era may unlock the true potential of life beyond Earth. Just when we thought we had Venus all figured out as a miserable planet no life could handle, a crazy new discovery has scientists questioning everything. Traces of phosphine gas were found in 2020 floating through Venus' harsh atmosphere. Now that wouldn't be so bizarre, except phosphine is usually a sign of living things here on Earth. Could microscopic aliens really be inhabiting the poisonous skies of Venus? And get this, the Soviets may have had an inkling back in their heyday exploring the planet in the 80s. Those recently revealed photos of weird creepy crawlies from Venera 13 have people wondering, did they spot life way before we had any clue? It's got the world's astronomers and astrobiologists all in a frenzy now. If simple bugs can thrive in the acids and heat of Venus's air, just imagine what kind of crazy extremophiles might exist in the clouds. Who's to say the entire planet isn't teeming with life forms perfectly evolved to handle conditions we see as pure hell? With its stores of old Soviet data and samples left behind, Venus is looking like the hottest ticket in space again. And this time, scientists won't be so quick to rule life out, just because it's not something you and I could handle. The red-hot alien world has plenty more surprises in store, I just know it. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the bodacious astrophysicist, is always ready to geek out about the latest big discoveries in space. So when scientists announced finding phosphine gas on venomous Venus, Neil had plenty to say about it.
And just for people to recognize, when you have results that are interesting and unexpected, that they naturally attract more scientific scrutiny to see if it's correct. So that's a very natural urge that we all have. In fact, Paul, it's a problem if you get a result that's not particularly interesting and wrong. Very few people will find out that it's wrong because they don't care. So the verification process is not a level playing field, unfortunately.
Right. If you make a really interesting mistake, then everybody's going to know about it.
All right, so what else you got, Paul?
Move on? Okay. Philip Lyons, Patreon. My question is simple. When can we get a sample and bring it back to Earth to be studied? I think you can get it on Amazon. You got to be a Prime member.
And they deliver tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
In his expert opinion, this changed everything we thought we knew about our neighboring world. Before it was dismissed as just too extreme, but now it's different. The chance of aliens thriving in its poison air has NASA scrambling to solve the phosphine mystery. And Neil thinks that's just the start. With new eyes, we need to dig through everything the pioneering Soviet Venera missions revealed in their heyday, exploring Venus back in the 1960s and 80s. Did they accidentally snap pics of jet engine-sized space roaches without realizing it? There's only one way to find out, and it starts by hauling the Cold War data out of the archives. Between speculative Soviet photos and the tantalizing traces of phosphine, Tyson is convinced we're on the cusp of rewriting Venus's story. Could primitive life forms really call that scorching hothouse home? One thing's for sure, thanks to the bold Venera probes blazing the trail, we're finally ready to solve the biggest mysteries about Earth's mysterious twin. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Your support helps us reach more people with our content. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates.